This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Tuff, and thank you for participating in the NLCSA's construction stand down. And today's topic will be discussing traffic control and, of course, the dangers associated with that. When we were coming up with the topic, of course, all topics this week are discussing serious injury, and of course, traffic control being one of those things that are killing people on the roadways. It's certainly no secret that traffic control is, like I just said, killing people. But related numerous incidents in the last, say, 10 years. And I don't have the number right off the top of my head here now, but I would say close to 10 people, 10 construction workers, families that are impacted by traffic control related fatalities. So before we start, before we start discussing traffic control, I think it's important to discuss what is traffic control. So according to the legislation, traffic control is needed whenever the unregulated movement constitutes a hazard to workers. So whether that be working on the roadways, working what we call an encroachment on the roadways. So you're not necessarily blocking the full lane, but just a partial lane closure. And also, even if you're working within a meter of the roadway, for example, surveying crews or telecommunication crews, they all require traffic control as well. We use traffic control for charitable events, sporting events, um, parades, crack sealing, pothole filling, you name it, we use traffic control. And of course, it's one of those things that it is dangerous, it is high risk, but it's essential. And it's essential for the province to have traffic control and have traffic control legislation because it is such a prominent activity. So according to section 373 and 375 of our Newfoundland Labrador Act and Regulations, it doesn't go much into what discusses traffic control. It doesn't say much about traffic control at all. It just says when traffic control is needed. Just I told you that time, it's whenever the unregulated movement of vehicular traffic constitutes a hazard to workers. And it also says that all companies in relation to traffic control and conducting traffic control operations must follow the traffic control manual at a minimum. And because that traffic control manual is referenced in law, it's now the law. And that goes for anything referenced in law, whether it's a CSA standard or a guideline or some kind of practice. If it's referenced in the legislation, that now becomes the legislation. And what the legislation also talks about is it dictates training for all traffic control people. And I'll get into this later, but there is now 2 levels of training. But essentially what the legislation is referring to is that if you are controlling traffic with your hands, with a sign, whatever the case may be, you need some sort of traffic control training. But it's not just the OHS legislation and the act and regulations that cover or dictate or govern traffic control in this province. There's other manuals that would certainly play a role. Obviously, one that I've already discussed already is what's called the Transportation Works Traffic Control Manual. And this is the one that they're almost like pre-engineered diagrams that you must follow, and it pretty much discusses everything in relation to traffic control, from the devices, the signage, the legislation, the flags person requirements, and of course these pre-engineered plans that you must follow when designing or setting up a workplace. Workplace meaning your traffic control site. There's also another act that it kind of dictates traffic control as well. It's the Highway Traffic Act. And in the Highway Traffic Act, it talks about, I guess, the penalties if a member of the motoring public were to be found either speeding through a construction zone or not obeying by the laws and the posted signage and that sort of thing. So that's what the Highway Traffic Act does talk about. There's a little section in there. Another manual that it's kind of neat and really governs how we do traffic control in this province, but not only in this province, all over Canada. And that manual is called for short, we call it the MUTCDC. And it's the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Canada. So essentially what that manual is that if you're driving down a side street in St. John's, Newfoundland, or anywhere in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and you see a sign and it's an orange sign and it's this big and it's this high and it's this color and the font is this color, that's because there's specs that come with this signage. It's not just someone going out in their shop and going in their garage and saying, "I'm just going to make a sign." No, there's a certain code that all these signage and devices and how visible they are and the reflectivity of the material has to be, and that all stands from this manual all over Canada. So I guess theoretically, if we were to get in our car and drive from where I am to, is in Mount Pearl, Newfoundland, and drive across the province, even through Ontario or Alberta, all the signage should be the same because they're all following this uniformed manual that the entire country has to be on or has to follow. Another, I guess, document or legislation that would govern traffic control and very critical for construction companies to be aware of these are what we call municipal traffic control manuals. And these manuals are, I guess they're very similar to the Transportation Works Traffic Control Manual, which of course you'd only use that manual if you're on what we call a provincial highway. So what I like to say, if the Department of Works maintains your road, plows your road, fixes your road, whatever the case may be, you would follow the Transportation Works Manual. And you would follow that manual all over the province, unless the community you're working in has their own municipal manual. So, for example, the City of St. John's has their own traffic control manual. And because they have their own manual that's been approved by the traffic engineers at Department of Works, they that manual supersedes the traffic control manual, and they must, any contractor setting up traffic control in the City of St. John's must abide by the City of St. John's traffic control manual. Some other municipalities that have their own manual, it's the City of Corner Brook, the Town of Gander, and the Town of Grand Falls. There's only 4 municipalities in this province that have their own municipal manual. So if you're working in Pooch Cove, or if you're working in Plum Point or Happy Valley Goose Bay, or any of these other municipalities that do not have their own traffic control manual, you must follow the Transportation Works traffic control manual. Even if you're in, like I said, Happy Valley Goose Bay, and Happy Valley Goose Bay is a town, and they maintain their own roads, and they maintain their own snow clearing, and they maintain their own maintenance on their roadways. Because they don't have their own manual, you got to follow the overall one. So as I already mentioned, there are 2 types of traffic control training now. There's level 1 and there's level 2, and we're going to kind of go into the different responsibilities of a level 1 and a level 2 here shortly, or right now rather. So let's just talk about level 1 responsibilities. So you need this basic level training if you want to control traffic with a stop-slow paddle. If your intention is to go out on the roadway and direct traffic, at a minimum, you need a level 1 course. And essentially the responsibilities that are covered in a level 1 course, they make sure traffic is flowing. Okay, another thing they do is they make sure that the motoring public is given priority over work-related traffic. Although that as frustrated as you may be in waiting in construction zones, there has to be a happy medium between letting traffic flow through and, of course, getting the work done so they can move on to other projects. Of course, they stop or slow traffic when needed. A level 1 does that. They warn of any potential dangers. Of course, if someone's not abiding by the posted speed limit, for example, it's up to the level 1 to alert the workers downwind or down on the construction site that this person is not stopping, and that alone creates a serious health and safety risk there. And of course, they operate the stop slow paddle. And of course, as simple as that sounds, it does take skill. It's a very labor-intensive job. These individuals, they're out in all types of weather. They don't get the luxury of having their coffee in a cup holder or in an operating of in a machinery out of the elements. I'm not saying that job is easier, but these people have to be respected, and unfortunately, they do face a lot of issues, whether it's from the public, other motorists, the hazards about people speeding by them, and so on. And more hazards we'll go over shortly. Level one or level two responsibilities now. So level two responsibility, it's viewed more of as supervisory duties. So what level twos would be responsible for? They oversee and they implement all traffic control operations, they lane closures, detours. They actually set up the signage and devices as per the traffic control manual and as per the plan that they developed for that site. They create the traffic control plan, and we're going to discuss what a traffic control plan is. But essentially, it's the five whys with traffic control, and that's what they do. They create those plans. Another thing a level two does is that they liaise with stakeholders. So that you can't just shut down a provincial roadway or for a Trans-Canada highway without some notification from government officials, municipalities. You may need to call a specific radio station to say, hey, you know what, this road is going to be closed down. Um, there needs to be some public awareness around this. So that's a level two responsibility. And another thing level twos do, they supervise, and they supervise the entire traffic control operation. And a level two may be responsible for the traffic control operations, but a level two might also have other supervisory duties because they might just be a generic supervisor anyway. A level two can supervise one or multiple job sites. But I guess how they want it done or how the government wants it done is that a level or what's recommended, I should say, is that a level two be on job sites when the signs are being set up and the signs are being removed. What they do in between, it's up to them. So it's really important note here. It's level two course is currently a voluntary standard and not yet enforceable. And and because it's not enforceable, because it's not referenced in our NOHS Act and regulations. But this could change anytime. It's like anything. The letter's written, it's not signed yet, type of thing. Because an OHS officer may come out to your job site, they might see some issues, and they might direct that or suggest that level two be trained and placed on this job site. And the way the courses are currently designed, it's critical that you have both level ones and a mixture of level ones and level twos, because they both have different learning objectives and they both offer something different and they both bring something different to a job site. But of course, no one really knows when level twos are going to be actually being enforced. But it is recommended that you start training your employees and get them up to snuff on level two responsibilities. So, of course, as you can appreciate, traffic control people are out on the roadways. So PPE is a very big requirement for all traffic control people, and all workers for that matter. So, of course, I want to start with high visibility apparel. Any high visibility that you wear has to meet CSA standards, at least Class 2, Level 2. This information will be located on the tag from the purchased equipment there. The next thing level two or level one or level two or anybody in relation to traffic control needs is safety boots. They must meet CSA standard Z195, and that is located on the boots. And if you see a green symbol, that will indicate CSA compliance. Traffic control people also need hard hats, and this is kind of one thing that people say, oh, I don't need a hard hat, but you do need a hard hat. While there may not be nothing falling on top of your head, certainly for side impact, because as you know, there may be some situations where traffic control people have to be put in these tight situations and next to moving equipment. And that hard hat has to be type 2 class E. Important to always check your hard hat because they do expire. Hearing protection and eye protection are also required of and also expected of traffic control people. Of course, your hearing protection, as you may or may not know, they differ in how many decibels they block out and what they're rated for. So we'll just leave it at general hearing protection, and it's up to an employer to determine if that's enough hearing protection for the given situation. And eye protection, I mean, this is pretty obvious. You got flying debris, you have dust, you have other particulates in the air that could especially on a job site, that could get into a worker's eye and cause some vision problems. And there's also, other kind of PPE requirements that may include gloves, depending, situational dependent there, and of course respiratory protection if there's any dusty surface. But of course, if any time there's a dusty surface, the very first thing you should be considering is some dust suppression or calcium or other means. If you plan to do any nighttime operations and your intention is to use traffic control people, there are other PPE requirements that come with nighttime work. And just to very briefly talk about nighttime work, it's all the same PPE you've just had on. The only difference is that the traffic control person must wear white or light colored clothing. And it's up to an employer to determine what light colored clothing is, and they just have to wear that over their top half of their body. Usually, I'm just telling people like a white shirt, something, or maybe a Tyvek suit even. I don't know. It's that thing you're entirely wearing white, and you just have to put your high visibility apparel that's level, like class two, level two, over that white colored clothing. Another thing you have to have as a flags person or a traffic control person when you're working at nighttime is high reflective stripes on all around your hard hat. So you must have at least 80 centimeters squared of highly reflective 3M diamond grade material located on all sides of your hard hat. So front, back, side to side. It has to be 80 centimeters squared, which is about a nice, it's a nice size square. And one last thing that's required of a traffic control person working at night is that they must have a flashlight or some kind of LED strip or something that's, so they have a flag or not a flag, a traffic, stop slow paddle in one hand, and then they use the flashlight in another. Um, so now let's get into the traffic control operation. So there's hundreds of different setups that you can do when you're trying to control traffic, and as you can appreciate, those hundreds different situations, they're all set up differently. So they can be set up using traffic lights. They can be set up using what's called AFADs, which is automated flagger assistant devices. They're essentially just a stoplight with an arm that comes down, but the fun fact about these is that they're operated using a flagger, a traffic control person. So this person can be, 5 or 6 feet, on the shoulder of the road and have a remote or in a cab of a truck even, and operating this machine, this AFAD machine. They're fairly new. You can use markers, you can use barriers or barricades, or commonly referred to as jersey barriers. Heavy barricades can be made of rebar and pieces of wood, or what we call light duty barricades, or those wooden horses. I mean, that's all traffic control as well. You can use channeling devices. So you can use things that pretty much take people from one lane and shift them into another. They can be rebar, chevron markers on rebar. It can be cones. It can be drums. You can use vehicles for traffic control. You can use what we call candlesticks is the slang term, but they're I guess the official term are delineator posts. They're those tall ones that kind of look like a candle because they got the little yellow on the top of it. So there's hundreds of different ways of and hundreds of different equipment. And it's very important to realize too that traffic control, the people who are making these devices, traffic control is a business. You have to do your research. You have to understand that what's here at beginning of the year, and this is the equipment I can use. There might be new equipment on the market, so it's critical that you always keep yourself refreshed and up to snuff, we'll say, on traffic control. Because like I said, it is a business, no different than fall protection. I mean, you look at any fall protection equipment, I mean, it changes almost weekly, the device that you can use. Same thing with traffic control. Now, if we consider the hierarchy of controls, which we will discuss shortly, when we're deciding to use traffic control people, they should really be our last resort. And we need to consider controlling traffic in other ways, because when we look at risk and we look at severity and probability, if we want to reduce people from getting killed, we have to remove the people from the roadway. And so we should be looking at detouring traffic altogether, closing the road altogether, using heavy barricades, using traffic lights instead of flags person, using AFAD devices instead of flags persons, vehicles instead of flag persons. So flag persons, yes, while the training is essential and critical and needed and legislatively required, flags people are really our last resort, because we don't want to put people on the roadway, but unfortunately there are some situations where um, uh, using people is our only resort. But you know what? Sometimes we get so caught up in talking about, traffic is our only issue, when in reality traffic is not our only hazard. And I got to repeat that traffic is not our only issue when we're out on the roadway. We have everything from moving vehicles, obviously said that, but not necessarily vehicular traffic. It could be pedestrian traffic. It could be cyclists. They're getting more popular now. Maybe in your community where you're listening to this from, but it's not just the vehicular traffic. We also have power line contacts. Anyone here who's ever done a power line course would tell you that on the ground, standing next to the equipment is the most dangerous part, and not necessarily in the vehicle. So those are issues. Dangerous goods are potentials, hazardous situations for traffic control people. Conflict with public, big problem. People getting violent, having to wait in these lineups, but you got to realize that these construction workers are doing it to make your lives better. The bridges that they're building, the potholes that they're filling in, the whatever else they're doing, the telecommunications that they're fixing, the surveying that they're doing, they're there for a reason. And it's so we, but it is a really big problem. Conflict of public, extreme temperatures, from hot to cold. Like I said, these people are out in all types of weather conditions. And you see them one day they'll be in just a vest and a sheet and a t-shirt, and the next day you'll see them in full on rain gear because it's pouring out of the heavens. And another big problem that comes with standing all day with your arms stretched out holding a stop slow paddle is fatigue. Like I said, I know people who walk, and I've had them come into our courses that they say they listen. There's no problem for them to walk 20, 15, 20 kilometers a day on hot asphalt that's just been laid or paved, wearing steel-toed safety boots. So it is quite a laborious, intensive job, and they have respiratory hazards to deal with from like I said, asphalt, could be concrete mixing, could be just general dust being generated in the air, ultraviolet rays they have to deal with as well, and of course noise it's on the rise, and certainly if you look at WorkplaceNL statistics, noise and noise related claims are certainly on the rise there. And of course, they're so dangerous because once it's gone and it cannot be fixed. So there's a system that we use to control all these hazards, and we like to call that the hierarchy of controls. So we start off with elimination. Can we get rid of the traffic? Should be your ultimate question, or should be the ultimate question. Of course, how do we get rid of the traffic? Let's close the road altogether. Let's make it so we can't even come in contact with traffic. Next thing we should consider is detouring. And if we detour the traffic, that means no one can get hit. No one can be a victim to moving traffic or moving vehicles, whatever the case may be. The next thing we want to skip down to is what we call engineering controls. So under the engineering controls, I guess, hierarchy, we have substitution. Can we use traffic lights or automated flaggers instead of flags people? Can we use isolation? Can we use jersey barriers or other type of barricades to isolate the traffic from the workers? And of course, after we've considered or thought about at least, can we close the road, traffic lights, barriers? Let's go on to administrative controls. So when you think of administrative controls, think of plans and paperwork and training and procedures. And the hazard is still there. You're not getting rid of the issue. You're not eliminating it, but because you have proper procedures and proper training and plans, hopefully you've mitigated that risk and to such a level where you guys can work. The hazard and the people can work at the same time without causing injury. And of course, the last resort is PPE. When you think about it, when we're on the roadway, when we're on a highway and we have flaggers or flags people and traffic control people using PPE, it's useless really if they get hit. I sometimes make a little joke. It's not a joke. It's not funny, but if you wearing a vest, it's not going to do anything because all it's going to do is find you quicker if you get hit. It's not going to deflect the vehicle. It's not going to, rip the vehicle in half. It's not going to stop a dangerous good being brought in your throat. It's not going to stop electricity being put to the ground. It's not going to make you colder or warmer. It does really nothing except for people seeing you when you're hit or before they hit you. So that's why PPE is a last resort, and of course, traffic control people should be the last resort as well when we're discussing traffic control. And the last thing I kind of want to discuss here, it's a very critical, I guess, part of traffic control is the traffic control plan. And everything stems from the traffic control plan that's completed by the level 2 traffic control person. And what a traffic control plan is, it's like the 5 W's with traffic control. So the who, what, where, when, and why of traffic control. Who? Who's going to be working there? Why? Why are we doing this? What are we doing? Where are we doing it to? How are we doing it? Everything. It's a big comprehensive document. It's usually 2 or 3 pages long. And of course, if you are involved in traffic control operation, this should be nothing new. It's required in both the OHS legislation, it's referenced in the traffic control manual, it's referenced in municipal manuals, so it's certainly nothing that's new to anybody. And it shows the correct way to set up a work area from start to finish, which be taken right from this pre-engineered traffic control manual. So these plans consider road alignment, they consider site distances, traffic volumes, weather conditions, site hazards. So they actually tell you how to, there's going to be a diagram sketched out there so you can actually set up a traffic control site. It talks about emergency vehicle accidents, incidents or accidents, it talks about hours of work. Are you in daylight? Are you in nighttime? Okay, what do we have to do for nighttime? What's the requirements in daytime? Where you're actually working to, of course, there's hazards associated with that. Traffic control during off hours. I know that's a bit of a contentious topic. If people say, gee, there's no workers out there and there's traffic control signs up. Yeah, because there has to be. Because just because there's no workers there doesn't mean that the hazards are removed. It might be uneven ground. It might be unsecured, maybe not 100% stable ground. That they can have people going 100 kilometers an hour. So traffic control during off hours do exist. But then one thing it should discuss, it's the actual traffic control persons themselves. So it talks about where they're going to be standing. Do they have an emergency exit route? If someone's coming down the road, well, are they going to get struck by a car going 100 kilometers an hour, or are they going to jump over a 100-foot cliff? So perhaps that's not the best place for them to stand. So that's why we have to think about that beforehand. It talks about, are they qualified? Do they at least hold at a minimum a level 1 certification? Hours of work. How long are we going to expect these traffic control people to stand in one position without a break or out some kind of job rotation? It's very common in the construction industry, of course, for operators to also have traffic control training so that they can have some, give the traffic control people a break, nutrition break, whatever the case may be. Talks about communications. How are traffic control person A and traffic control person B and C going to talk to each other, especially if they can't see each other? That has to be determined well before any work happens on the roadway. Talks about relief. Who's going to relieve them? And then, of course, talks about the site supervisor, who's going to be, or the traffic control supervisor, and of course, any specific site instructions that have to be given. These traffic control plans are required to be done on every single traffic control site in this province of Newfoundland and Labrador, from Nain down to St. Shots and everywhere in between. There's no getting out of it, and even in the municipal areas or the towns that have their own municipal manual, a requirement for a traffic control plan still exists. This plan has to be developed and communicated to all workers and revised as needed. There's no point of putting so much effort into a plan and then keeping it in the glove box for no one to see or read. And of course, like I said earlier, this is typically a level 2 responsibility. And why we kind of put it on the level 2 responsibility is because the level 1 course is not designed and it doesn't go into depth enough to equip the level 1 learner with the ability to do a plan. So that's why the level two course does have much more, much more focused on actual traffic control plans. So that's the traffic control plans, folks. And there's one thing I want to just finish off here when we talk about setting up a job site. Traffic control is not as simple as everyone thinks. It's quite technical, and I almost call it a little science. If you want to close off a road on a Monday morning, for example, that's not something that you talk about Monday morning. That's something that you talk about Thursday. that's something you talk about Wednesday in the previous week or even Friday. Because like I said, as you just read, you have a lot of planning to do and a lot of things to kind of iron out before you take on that role. So make sure you plan your work and work the plan, essentially what I'm trying to say here. So folks, that wraps up my talk on traffic control this morning. I encourage everyone to participate in the rest of the toolbox talks that are happening throughout the week. But for now, I'm Alex Tuff, a safety advisor with the NLCSA. So have a good day.